When you really look at it, the entire history of aviation is just one long story of solving impossible problems, one after another. Right from the very beginning, flight wasn't just about having a dream. It was about getting your hands dirty and tackling engineering challenges that nobody had ever even thought about before. It's a story of constant, relentless innovation. So let's jump right in at the very beginning, with the first huge hurdle they had to clear.
For the Wright brothers, this was the question. Getting into the air wasn't about some fantasy of flapping wings. It all boiled down to a very real, very practical problem. How do you power this thing? They knew they needed a very specific mix of power and low weight, and when they went looking for an engine that fit the bill, they found, well, absolutely nothing.
Their calculations were incredibly precise. They needed an engine that could kick out at least 8 horsepower. But, and this was the kicker, it couldn't weigh more than 200 pounds. The brand new auto industry, no help at all. Every car engine they looked at was just way too heavy. So they had to invent their own solution, literally from the ground up.
And the guy who actually made that engine a reality was their amazing mechanic, Charlie Taylor. I mean, his own words just paint such a cool picture of how they worked. No complicated blueprints, no formal designs. He's talking about sketching parts on scratch paper and then just building it. It took him 6 weeks. This was pure, raw, figured-out-as-you-go innovation.
So to hit that crazy ambitious weight target, they made a choice that was really radical for 1903. They decided to cast the engine's crankcase from an aluminum-copper alloy. Now, at the time, this was basically unheard of. It was one of the very first times anyone had used aluminum in an aircraft engine, and it was a decision that would basically shape aviation for the next 100 years.
And just look at what that first step led to. Their little engine and propellers managed to produce about 90 pounds of thrust. Now compare that to a modern jet engine that can churn out over 20,000 pounds. It's an absolutely mind-boggling leap. It really shows you how far we've come. But of course, once we figured out power, a whole new impossible problem was waiting right around the corner.
Okay, so those first airplanes were all made of wood and fabric. They were super lightweight, sure, but they were also incredibly fragile. They could rot. They were terrible in bad weather. The obvious solution seemed to be, hey, let's just build them out of metal. But making that switch was so much harder than anyone ever imagined. Back in 1920, all the experts at NASA, the precursor to NASA, declared that metal was the future. But just look at these dates. A full decade later, metal wings were still way heavier than wooden ones, and only a tiny fraction of aircraft being made were all metal. This wasn't a quick change. It was a long, frustrating slugfest. And you can see why they were so motivated. Engineers figured metal would be fireproof, way more durable than wood that could splinter and rot, and just a much more consistent, reliable material to build with. On paper, it was the perfect upgrade.
But in the real world, metal came with its own set of brand new and sometimes terrifying problems. It would buckle under compression in ways they didn't expect. Early aluminum alloys could actually corrode from the inside out, totally invisible to the naked eye, leading to sudden catastrophic failure in the air. On top of all that, building with it was so complex that the planes became incredibly expensive.
All right, so let's fast forward. After decades of mastering aluminum, engineers hit another wall. To make planes even more efficient, to make them fly farther and faster, they needed something even lighter and stronger than metal. And this need led to the next great leap in aviation, the composite revolution. And the shift away from metal has been just dramatic. If you look at a modern airliner, something like the Boeing 787, advanced composites now make up fully half of the entire structure. Aluminum, the material that dominated for so long, is now just one part of a much bigger material puzzle. The real star of this new era is carbon fiber. You see, these materials have an incredible strength-to-weight ratio that metals just can't compete with, and that allows for these huge reductions in weight, which, as you know, translates directly into better fuel efficiency and longer range.
But here's what's really cool. It's not just about swapping one material for another. It's about the entirely new shapes these materials make possible. Because composites are so strong and so versatile, engineers can now design things like the blended wing body, which companies like JetZero are pioneering. It's a complete departure from the classic tube and wing airplane, and it has the potential to be 50% more fuel efficient. That's a game changer.
So, with these stronger bodies and more efficient shapes, aircraft just kept getting more and more complex. And this created yet another impossible problem. How do you safely and effectively control a machine that has become this advanced?
The evolution of flight control is really a story of moving from the physical to the digital. We started with pilots physically pulling on cables connected to the wings. Then we moved to fly-by-wire systems where electronic signals do the work. And now we're at AI-assisted systems that can actually learn and adapt in real time. The next logical step, of course, is greater and greater levels of autonomous.
So what does all this AI stuff actually do for us? Well, a lot. It saves fuel by constantly optimizing flight paths. It can predict when a part might fail, which lets us fix problems before they even happen. And it acts as a tireless, incredibly intelligent co-pilot, which dramatically reduces the risk of human error. It makes flying safer and more efficient for everyone.
All this incredible innovation has brought us right here, to today. And now we're facing what might just be the biggest, most impossible problem yet. How do we keep flying without destroying the planet?
A major contender for the future is hydrogen. You've got these incredible projects like the Airbus Zero-E that imagine a future of carbon-neutral flight where the only thing coming out of the engine is water. It's a beautiful, incredible vision, but the engineering challenge is absolutely staggering.
The heart of the challenge really comes down to one mind-bending number: -253 degrees Celsius. That is the cryogenic temperature you have to maintain just to keep hydrogen in its liquid state so you can use it as fuel. Now just try to imagine the technology it's going to take to maintain that temperature reliably on an aircraft flying at 35,000 feet.
And the challenge goes way, way beyond just the airplane itself. We'd have to figure out how to produce massive amounts of green hydrogen using renewable energy. We'd have to build an entirely new global supply chain to move it around the world, and we'd have to completely re-engineer our airports with cryogenic storage. We're talking about a problem on a global, systemic scale.
But if the history of aviation has taught us anything, it's what the old flying ace Eddie Rickenbacker once said. Aviation has proved that, given the will, we can do the impossible. From that first little engine to the incredible dream of hydrogen flight, the story has always been one of relentless, brilliant problem-solving. Which, of course, leaves us with one final question. After more than a century of turning the impossible into the everyday, what monumental challenge do you think aviation is going to conquer next?